What's up, everybody? It's Jordan, and welcome to the Sports Behind Show. And today I'm joined by Braeden Guthrie, also known as Bengals NFL on Instagram. How you doing today, Braeden?
I'm doing great. How are you doing?
Doing really, really good. Excited for you to join the show today. We have a lot to talk about. Obviously the Bengals get a much needed victory, yesterday against New Orleans Saints. We're going to talk about that. We're going to be talking about some of these other games like Pittsburgh's shocking upset victory over the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. The Ravens losing to the Giants, the Bills and Chiefs game, and also kind of a couple of teams here with contenders or pretenders. After today's game, it's going on right now between the Broncos and Chargers. We are now going to be heading into Week 7. Absolutely crazy. This seems like one of the fastest NFL seasons ever. There's lots of college football talk, with Tennessee beating Alabama. So much to get into. So we'll go ahead and get started talking about the Bengals' victory. The Bengals win yesterday. They defeated New Orleans Saints 30-26. So what were your kind of thoughts and reactions on this Bengals victory against the New Orleans Saints?
Yeah, so I'll start with the positives of my reactions. Have to start with the obvious of Joe Burrow and Ja'Marr Chase. These past few weeks, they just had issues getting Ja'Marr Chase involved, and that was a really frustrating thing, obviously. But this week, we saw that chemistry come back. Joe Burrow placed the ball right where Chase can get it. I think on that Chase 60-yard touchdown, he threw it into perfect place, kind of leading him inside, able to break that tackle. And I think that was a really underrated throw, even if he only threw it 10 yards. And then Joe Burrow just looked on his game. He was escaping the pocket again, avoiding sacks. Also ran for a touchdown, how I still don't know how he avoided all that contact, and he had a crazy play where he was kind of running around, then was running towards the line of scrimmage and threw it to Tyler Boyd. Well, yeah, it's just plays like that show that Joe Burrow, he's still Joe Burrow. He's going to make plays. While he hasn't had exactly the best performance these past few weeks, it shows that we shouldn't be overreacting to a few bad games. Joe Burrow's Joe Burrow, and they're going to continue to get Ja'Marr Chase involved.
And it's one of those games, like we've been waiting for Burrow to just have that normal game of his. If you look first 5 weeks, we just haven't seen it. The only game that throughout the first 5 weeks he threw for 300 yards. He had 5 turnovers in the game. That was against the Steelers. And you're just waiting for Burrow to have a game that, if he has a game that he goes off and is himself, the Bengals are going to be a difficult team to beat. And the crazy part is when you look at this game, Burrow had 300 passing yards, a couple of passing touchdowns and a rushing touchdown, like you mentioned. But there were times the offense was kind of stagnant and just couldn't get anything going. And Burrow still did that, and we still put up 30 points. And this is what just kind of frustrated me throughout the first 5 weeks is that this offense wasn't going. But when it is, it's just going to be very difficult to stop. When we're putting up 30 points and this offense was still not great at times, really proves and shows how dangerous this offense can be. I mean, Chase had over 130 receiving yards. That catch and run was absolutely ridiculous. And that's the Chase we want to see as well. We've seen glimpses of Chase being his self from last season, but Chase really hasn't got a ton of yardage this past couple of weeks up until yesterday. But I like that Boyd got involved, 6 catches for 66. Higgins had 6 catches for 47. Honestly, didn't really seem like he had that many catches. But when we get all these people involved, when we get Higgins getting 6 catches, Boyd getting 6 catches, and Chase getting over 130 yards and 2 touchdowns, this team is very difficult to beat. And also Joe Mixon. He wasn't involved in the passing game a ton, but he had 4 receptions and a receiving touchdown, over 20 receiving yards. The only kind of frustrating thing to me, I don't like to nitpick a ton, but Mixon only had 8 rushing attempts. I just did not understand that at all. It didn't make any sense. I knew Burrow was great yesterday, but I still would like to see Mixon get more rushing attempts, especially the fact he's starting to finally get going. Look at when we played the Ravens. Mixon averaged 5.5 yards a carry. Up those games previous, he did not average 3 yards a carry any of the first 4 games. And then yesterday, Mixon only had 8 rushing yards, but he had, 45 yards, average about 6 yards a carry. So he's getting better these past couple games, which is great because once he gets more carries and if Burrow in this offense continues like it has, this team could be very dangerous. And this is kind of what we've been hoping for since the very beginning. Once this team gets going, we're one of the best teams, one of the best offenses in the league, and we're going to be very difficult to beat.
Yeah, I completely agree. And even though he had the 8 yards, it was keeping the Saints honest, and they kind of brought the safeties down, and that gives the Bengals an opportunity. For example, at Jamar Chase's first tackle, they came up a little. Joe Burrow threw it perfectly. So when Joe Mixon is performing well, it really opens up the offense. And that's exactly what this offense has needed over the first 5 weeks.
So JXCK underscore GXM3R. That's very difficult to say. The offense just needed their start. Now that they're getting back, they'll be back for the season. I can kind of see that. It's one of those things you don't want to overreact too much. This is a Saints team that's not great. They had lots of injuries, but this is a performance that you get one game and they can get something going. You look at last season towards the end of the regular season. We got one win, and then we were just on a roll towards the end of the season and into the postseason. But looking at this game here, it was just very interesting because it's so weird. Starting off, Trent Taylor fumbles, and the Saints score on that following possession. Like, holy crap, we might lose the Saints, and we might start off 2-4. And at that point, the offense wasn't really going yet. And it's one of those situations where it was just very frustrating. We should not be in that situation, but fortunately, we were able to get ourselves out of that hole. And I mean, the Bengals' last drive, pressure was on them. Burrow's pass to Chase, like you mentioned, a great throw. I mean, that catch and run was absolutely ridiculous. And I mean, that just kind of proves what this offense can do. And Chase, one of the best receivers in the NFL. But I thought this defense, passing defense, did all right. Just rushing defense, not so much. When you look at this, Jermaine Pratt played amazing, had 14 tackles. Hubbard had 7 tackles as well for half a sack. But this Saints, offense, Taysom Hill played a lot. Michael Thomas was out and Chris Olave was out. Winston was out as well. We were very, very fortunate. We played another team that had a lot of injuries when they played the Bengals. We're getting very fortunate playing so many teams who have been injured throughout this season. But when you look at this, the Saints rushed for 228 rushing yards. That's bad for the Bengals. They gave up 6.7 rushing yards per carry. It makes no sense to me. The Bengals rushing defense played worse against the Saints than the Ravens. You would not really think that. But when you look at this, Saints team, and you look at this Bengals team, last season they were pretty decent against the run. This season so far they've been pretty decent against the run as well. And it's just, maybe it's just a fluke performance, but kind of hope, that's better these next couple of weeks when we play, some good teams who have running backs. And we play the Panthers coming up soon with McCaffrey. We play the Browns with Kareem Hunt and Chubb. So hopefully that gets fixed. That to me was kind of my main thing on defense. And something else like play calling. Play calling was better, but there were still a couple instances just did not make any sense. 1st and 20, we had a shotgun run with P. Ryan. I just don't get that. There's other plays, like when McPherson made the kick and we were still trailing with only about 3-4 minutes left before the Bengals got the ball and they scored that touchdown. When McPherson made that long field goal, we had the play clock go all the way down to 7. That could have hurt us big time. That should have been snapped way earlier before 7. And we really, that could have saved us 30 seconds if we would have got the ball back and we tried to score. But we were fortunate since, Chase had that, catch and run. But aside from a couple of play calls in our rushing defense, this team was just really, really great. And this is what you want to see for the rest of the season for the Bengals.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really nice to see the offense put together a complete game. You can argue that they did that against the New York Jets, but I would say there's significantly less talent versus the Saints. That might be a bit of an overreaction. But yeah, we've seen all season the Bengals were unable to put it together a complete game against the Steelers. The offense was struggling tremendously. Week 2, offense struggles again, and the defense, while played pretty decent, struggled against Cooper Rush. Then they're obviously able to beat the Jets and Dolphins. And you could argue with the Dolphins that was also almost a complete game, but at the same time, Tua got hurt, and I actually think Bridgewater played better than him, but that also takes energy away from the Dolphins, and that's not an excuse why they lost. But the Bengals offense really struggled that first half, and they really struggled in the first quarter against the Saints. But like we're talking about, they really picked it up. And I think that's something impressive. We scored 30 points despite a really bad first quarter. You have to think if they put together a better first quarter, that could lead to almost 40 points.
And like you're saying, we're not we haven't been able to play great in the first half and second half just for a long time. It doesn't make any sense. We can do it, but it's just not consistently. Even go back to last season. When we might play good in the first half, but crappy in the second half, and vice versa. But then when we started getting on that run and towards the end of the season and then the playoffs, we played good in both halves. We just did not have that the first 5 games really so far, even in our wins against the Dolphins and the wins against the Jets. I think we only scored 1 touchdown against the Jets second half. Just one of those deals like when we're ahead, I feel like we just kind of let off the gas pedal a little bit and type of deal. But I'm glad we won. Huge, huge win. And it's one of those situations where heading into the season, I felt like this was a possible, loss, upset loss. But I'm glad that we won. And it's one of those deals like heading into the season, we'll beat the Saints. At this point, we'll be 4-2. We would have lost this game. We would have been 2-4. And the odds of us making the postseason would be significantly low. And this is such a key game. I mean, we're 3-3 right now, which isn't great after 6 weeks. Obviously we thought we'd be better than this, but we would have been 2-4. I'm not trying to overreact, but if we're 2-4, we would have lost this game. I would kind of say the season would have been over with, but it's a good thing we won because now we're, the Ravens have the head, but we are now, have the same record as the Ravens, where they lost against the Giants, but huge game against the Bengals, against the Saints yesterday to improve the record to 3-3. And looking at here, the Bengals play the Atlanta Falcons this upcoming Sunday. This is very interesting. The Atlanta Falcons are 3-3 as well. And it's weird because they have one of the worst rosters in the NFL. Does not make any sense. The coaching has been very, very good for the Falcons. Like I said, they're 3-3, but all 3 of their losses have been by 1 possession. So that's something else to look at too. I mean, if they just had slightly better quarterback play, this team could maybe be 4-2 right now, which is just crazy. And if they were 4-2, they would be first in NFC South because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are struggling a lot. The Saints have been injured. The Panthers are horrible. And there's something else with the Falcons is very interesting. They're the only team in the NFL right now to cover the spread in all 6 games. I don't know what the spread is for the Bengals game, but I feel like that's something interesting to look into. With the Bengals and Falcons, any kind of, interesting, things about the Falcons or Bengals Falcons kind of interested in see this Sunday?
Yeah. So what scares me against the Falcons is that rushing game. I think they're leading the rushing in the NFL or maybe top 5, but they were able, that's the kind of their offense and why it gets Marcus Mariota some leverage and able to get away with a mediocre performance. And like we're talking about, the rushing defense was not there. And I think that shows the impact DJ Reader has had. And, Tefele didn't certainly have, I think he's one of the winners from this game, but he's not DJ Reader. So the Bengals are going to need to step up against the run game. Like you said, they did better against the Ravens, against the Saints. So you just have to wonder how the Bengals are going to respond, especially with now Logan Wilson possibly being out. Like you said, Jermaine Pratt had a really good game despite the rushing game issues for the defense. Jermaine Pratt's going to have to step up. Akeem Davis-Gaither, he'll certainly get more snaps than some other linebackers will definitely rotate, and guys like Marcus Bailey. So I'm really interested to see if Logan Wilson is out, how they'll kind of rotate the defense, because missing both those guys is certainly not unhelpful, you could say.
And completely agree. And something else with Wilson, Pratt's a free agent at the end of the season. I mean, I would say that we'll re-sign him, but let's say we don't. This could be, kind of a early, preview of next season with this Bengals linebacker core. If Wilson were being out, this is a game that we can see a guy like Davis-Gaither get more snaps and more reps, who I think is so far who has played pretty good. When Pratt was out in the Jets game. I think Davis Gaither had like 13 tackles, something like that, 9 solo tackles. Marcus Bailey, a guy who can step up when he needs to. He can make a big play here and now, once every now and then. But in this Bengals team, Wilson, if he's out, that is very interesting because, obviously with Reader out, like you're mentioning, and then Wilson, who has been, just a huge piece for this defense, has the most interceptions for a linebacker since he was drafted. Would be very interesting. And something else, when you look at the Falcons, and with Mariota, obviously he's a mobile quarterback, the Bengals were able to contain Jackson a lot, when we played them on Sunday Night Football. And the stats were deceiving because when you look at Jackson, he had like 60 rushing yards, but really, he really only had 30 up until the final drive. We kind of at times tend to struggle against mobile quarterbacks. I want to see how this defense goes up against Mariota, especially with Reader out and the chance of possibly Logan Wilson being out. Our defense, who already possibly down two big starters, and it's a mobile quarterback of Mariota. No, he's not great. He's not as mobile as Jackson or Josh Allen. It'll be very interesting to see how the Bengals can kind of game plan against Mariota with him being mobile and everything.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this is a game where Sam Hubbard's going to have to step up. He had a really good game on Sunday, one of the few defenders that were a winner from this game. And he's not the most dominant pass rusher, but he plays the run so well. And even that doesn't always translate to the passing game. He's a smart player, and more often than not, you see him contain. So I think Hubbard's going to have a good game, and he will need to step up. Kind of like how he did this last game.
Oh yeah, 100%. And Hubbard, to me, he's underrated because he was one of those guys last year. A decent amount of sacks for us last year, but he's not even known for sacks. He's known more so, against the run. But if he steps up, and if Hendrickson, like he's been playing recently, it's just if we all get going, we're one of the best teams in the league. But it's just a matter of fact if everybody can get going at once. Jack Gamer, the guy who's been commenting a couple of times, Bengals do need to pick up their run game. If we can pick up our run game and Mixon can get 15, 20 carries, and he can average the 5-6 yards of carries that he's had the last 2 games, and Burrow doesn't even need to throw for 300 if he could throw for like 250, something like that, and if Mixon's getting over 100 rushing yards, the odds of us winning are significantly high because Burrow's getting some passing yards, a couple of touchdowns, and Mixon's running the ball for 5-6 yards of carry, also taking time off the clock. Would be great for us, but I would really like to see Mixon get more rushing attempts too, because it's so weird. Like in the Ravens game, he only had 14 rushing attempts. That was his lowest of any game, despite him killing the yards per carry in the game than any previous game. This past game, he nearly has half as many carries as he did against Baltimore, and he had even more rushing yards per carry yesterday against the Saints. I'm really hoping he can get going. He's starting to get going again, so hopefully he can get some more carries that he did earlier in the first couple games, like against the Steelers and the Cowboys. And looking at this, games here yesterday in Week 6 of the NFL, there's a couple of interesting games here. To me, one that kind of stands out is the Steelers beating the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You do not bet against the Steelers. I hate the Steelers. I don't like talking good about the Steelers, but I try not to be biased. Like, you can never count out the Steelers no matter what. The spread was 10 in this game. I didn't bet on this game, but if I did, I would have picked the Steelers to cover. It's one of those games, like, you just cannot. I would say the Patriots and Steelers are 2 teams you can never rule out no matter what. Kenny Pickett started this game for Pittsburgh. He was 11 of 18, 67 yards, and a touchdown. He gets hurt. Trubisky comes in. Trubisky was freaking phenomenal. 9 of 12, 144, and a touchdown. This is something that just did not make sense to me. I think the last video I did was a couple weeks ago. It was the day after. It was a Monday. It was when they benched Trubisky for Pickett against the Jets, and that just did not make sense. It was one of those situations where they kind of put Kenny Pickett under the fire, and it's like, here, try to do the best you can do. And he struggled. He had 3 picks and only 12 attempts against the Jets defense, and this was just so unlike Mike Tomlin. It's so uncharacteristic of Mike Tomlin, who's a top 5 head coach in the NFL easily. Like him, hate him, whatever, you have to accept, he's one of the best coaches in the NFL. He puts Pickett against the Jets. He sucks. The following week, he starts him against the Bills. It's like he's setting him up to fail. It just did not make any sense. I don't know why they would have had Pickett play against the Bills. When you look at rookies, especially rookie quarterbacks, if you have like your first start or first couple games, and if you suck, it's hard to get your confidence back. Look at John Ross, a rookie, who was hurt, kind of struggled, never really got that confidence back. And I felt like Trubisky would have made more sense to him play against Buffalo. And then maybe, let's say, Pickett could have started this game for his first career start. But, Pickett gets hurt this game. Trubisky comes in, went in the game. Trubisky should have never been benched in the first place. I'm not trying to be one of those people just because he played good. Oh, he should not have been benched. One of those people who are just, saying that because he did good. It just did not really make sense because they could have maybe won that Jets game if they didn't bench Trubisky. Pickett had 3 turnovers and it was still one possession game. And, even if they played Trubisky, they would have lost to the Bills. But this game, to me, just proves how good the Steelers are year after year. I know they're only 2-4 right now, but turnover-free football. I said this the whole freaking offseason. I said this all week heading into the Bengals-Steelers game in week 1. If the Steelers have no turnovers, if Trubisky has turnover-free football, about 200 yards, they're one of the best teams in the NFL. And they just beat the best quarterback of all time. Trubisky had 0 turnovers. It just kind of proves if this Steelers team, if the turnover-free football is just so important in this league, and if this Steelers team can continue to have turnover-free football, they're 2-4 right now, their record will keep going if Trubisky or Pickett start so they can just have, 200 yards, a touchdown or 2 with no turnovers. This was just a great game for the Steelers with a major upset against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers.
Yeah, first off, I want to say I completely agree about the Kenny Pickett suddenly starting. I also thought that was out of character and really weird. And another reason, you covered the big thing, just playing against the Bills and just kind of being thrown under the fire. I thought it was just too soon. Obviously, first few weeks, Trubisky was struggling a lot, but I think you need to give him more time. And it's still a new offense to him. And yeah, Kenny Pickett's injured, and who knows if he'll play this week. I believe the injury was a concussion. Just benching him so early probably brought his confidence down a little. So, yeah, I agree that I think they rushed Kenny Pickett starting. And, yeah, they can't control the concussion. But, yeah, I just agree. They're kind of setting him up for failure. I think Trubisky got the short end of the deal. So, yeah, I completely agree.
And, it sucks that the Steelers won. It sucks that the Steelers won, but it's a good thing that the Ravens lost. The Steelers are only a game behind us now, and they have the head-to-head, because they beat us in week 1. But, we now have the same record as the Ravens, but they had the head-to-head, when they beat us in Sunday Night Football. This is so weird. This doesn't make any sense. When you look at the Ravens, they lose to the Giants. I thought the Ravens were a top 5 team in the NFL. I've seen all these people on Twitter, they're one of the best teams in the league. And it's so weird. After the first 4 weeks, people are already, Jackson's the MVP. Like the past 2 weeks, he's played absolutely horrible. Even though the Ravens beat the Bengals, Burrow didn't play good against the Ravens, but he still outplayed Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson just got outplayed by Daniel Jones. Like Jackson was 17-32, 210, a touchdown, and an interception. And he had a fumble. With less than 2 minutes ago, the New York Giants score a touchdown to get the lead 24-20. The Ravens get the ball. It's time for Lamar Jackson to win with his arm, which he cannot do. He can only win with his legs, and it can only get him so far. He can get bailed out by Justin Tucker like he did against the Bengals. But when it comes down to it, in the biggest moments, in the biggest plays of the game, when the lights are on him, Lamar Jackson cannot step up and win games for the Baltimore Ravens. The most important drive of the game against the New York Giants, he fumbles. When you look at the most important drive of the game, I believe against the Buffalo Bills, he throws a horrible pass against the Bills and they lose. He has chances to win. He does not do it. I don't know why he does not get more criticized than what he does. When it comes to, pressure and big-time moments, he is absolutely horrible, and it doesn't get talked about, and I don't know why. This Ravens team, even though they beat us, are so overrated. Lamar Jackson this season has been so overrated. He's been bailed out by, the Ravens playing good, when it comes to, Tucker getting 50, 55-yard field goals, by the Ravens, great defense. This Ravens team blew a 17-point lead and 21-point lead. You look at, they just lost to the Giants. The Giants are good, but I still don't really know what to think of them. I mean, we're 6 games in, and there's still kind of a question mark to me. But this was a game, I thought it could have been close, but this is really uncharacteristic for the Ravens to lose to the Giants. I think they're easily one of the most overrated teams in the NFL right now. It's not even close. And I'm super glad that they lost, because now we can just win this week and they lose this week. We are now first in the AFC North. But I'm super glad the Ravens lost and Jackson sucked, because people hopefully are starting to realize Jackson is overrated and this Ravens team is so freaking overrated. And I say it all the time. People say, oh, you're a hater. I am a hater, 100%. Like, I do not like the Ravens and I do not like Jackson.
Yeah, I completely agree about Lamar Jackson. And when I give this comparison, it's not their play style at all. It just kind of reminds me of big moments. But I'm getting Andy Dalton flashbacks when it comes down to the final moment. Andy, more often than not, didn't step up. I mean, I still remember when he threw it away on 4th and 3. I'm still pissed. Not still pissed off about it, but I remember that play. And that was kind of the moment where I'm like, yeah, we need a new quarterback. But yeah, I mean, even against the Bengals last week, he has 60 rushing yards, but he missed 2 easy throws that one of them should have been a touchdown. And yeah, it was a 4th and 3 throw. He had a chance to step up and he didn't. Yeah, I completely agree. Like, even though they did beat us last week, they just don't scare me that much. Like, when we go play them again, I'm going to be pretty confident, especially if the offense can keep up their momentum, score early in the game, make Lamar Jackson throw. That's the recipe for beating him. Like, it's kind of cliche. We've seen that all over the media over years, but it's true. I mean, we see it week after week when they lose. Lamar struggles with accuracy. Don't get me wrong. He has some great throws sometimes, but you don't see it consistently. And if you don't see it consistently, then you can't expect those big wins if it's coming down to the final drive.
100%. And to me, I think Jackson's the most overrated quarterback in the NFL. The only person I would say you can make a case for is Baker Mayfield, but both of those guys are just so overrated. And Jackson, like you mentioned, if you make him pass, you're going to win. And unfortunately, that did not happen this past week. When we played them, and it's still kind of frustrating. We played so freaking amazing on defense. Jackson passing sucks. He even played worse than I thought he would when we played against him, on Sunday. But just our offense didn't get anything going. It's not that the Ravens really beat us. I don't like to make excuses, but it's not that the Ravens really beat us. It's just that we shot ourselves in the foot. Our coaching that game was horrible. Somebody commented earlier, our coaching against Baltimore was so freaking bad. If Taylor had better play calls, we easily would have beat the Ravens. And like you said, 100% agree. I'm not scared of the Ravens at all. Like, we play them one of the final weeks of the season, we're going to beat them, like 100%. I don't like to be overconfident. I was overconfident, when we played them last week, but we match up so well against them. And I just don't get why teams are not, kind of playing the Ravens more like how our defense plays them. When you make Jackson throw and you kind of eliminate, his running ability, it's just you have a much better chance to win. And hopefully, this Ravens team starts losing more games and we start winning more games so we can maybe clinch the division for a second consecutive season. But, the Ravens lose and fall to 3-3 against the New York Giants. One other game here, it's very interesting. Obviously, everybody's, game of the week to watch was the Bills and the Kansas City Chiefs. The Bills won 24-20. And this is one of those games I don't really want to overreact too much because just because the Bills won, I don't think they're better by a lot. I feel like both these teams are still kind of even. This is a very, very good game. And it's one of the situations where, this is going to be, 40-37 or something like that. I thought it was going to be 31-28. I had Buffalo winning, but it's one of those deals like you can have a great offense, but you still have to have somewhat of a good defense. This Bills defense is like the best in the NFL. Shutting down Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs at just 20 points is ridiculous. I mean, Allen was 27 of 40, over 300 yards, 3 touchdowns. Mahomes had over 300 yards, couple touchdowns. Stephon Diggs really stepped up for the Bills. 10 receptions, almost 150 yards and a touchdown. I would not be shocked at all if this was we see a rematch here in the AFC Championship game. Great game. This is one of those deals. They talked about it. Romo especially talked about it. For us, growing up, early 20s and stuff like that. We grew up and we saw, Manning and Brady. When we grew up, that was kind of like the big quarterback rivalry. My kids growing up, now this is probably going to be like Josh Allen against Mahomes. This could be possibly that next, quarterback rivalry. But this was just a great game to watch. 2 of the best quarterbacks in the league, and I don't know, just this Bills team to me it's kind of hard to say they're not the best team in the NFL right now. But even when the Chiefs lost, I don't think they're that far behind them.
Oh, I completely agree. And what was kind of funny before the game, Tony Romo said this is going to be a 24-20 type of game. So I just kind of found that amusing. But yeah, I agree. I think they're going to be seeds 1 and 2. Probably the Bills 1, the Chiefs 2, but that could easily switch up. And yeah, I think while it was a little more low scoring than people expected, I think both defenses say, hey, yeah, our offense is extremely talented, but don't forget about us. The defenses really stepped up. We're able to an extent, control and contain Mahomes as a Josh Allen. And both of these teams have kind of gave a blueprint to the NFL with the film that teams are going to receive. Like, how did the Bills contain Mahomes? How did the Chiefs contain Allen? And I think, I don't think that's going to exploit them or anything like that. I think it does kind of give a path to what defenses should expect if they of like the certain coverages the Chiefs and Bills ran. I think we'll see other teams start to do that. Obviously, both defenses, like I said earlier, aren't talked about as much, but they are both extremely good. So if a team like the Panthers does all the same coverage, it's not going to work. But like I said, you'll likely see other NFL teams playing similar to how the Bills and Chiefs defense did. And while I don't think it's going to be like that for the Bills or Chiefs, I think they're going to go back to having a high-scoring games. I think that overall the defenses really stepped up and showed how talented they were.
And it's so interesting because, like, if you completely agree, and it's one of those deals, like, it's if you see, like, oh, we do kind of this scheme or something like this, and we can kind of contain Mahomes or Allen. If you can contain them, you're going to win. I just don't get, like, going back and watching, like, the Bengals and Chiefs, why do teams not kind of copy the Bengals in the second half to kind of contain Mahomes? It just doesn't make any sense. Why do teams not watch the Bengals to contain Jackson and Mahomes? Like, Lou Anarumo, it's so crazy to me, honestly. Like, the fact that he's with us right now is kind of wild. Like, how good he played against Jackson and Mahomes. You would think a team. I know this is a league where it's becoming ridiculously offensive heavy, more so defense. But it's just kind of weird that Lou Anarumo was not more considered to be a head coach in the NFL. But Jack Gamer here was really excited for the Chiefs and Bills game after the Bills won. I've been hearing people say this means the Bills are better, but I do think they're equal. Chiefs also don't have Tyreek Hill. Yeah, that's something else. Like, you look at it, the Chiefs, they don't have that top guy. I know they have Travis Kelce, but when it comes to wide receivers, they don't have that elite guy anymore. I mean, you have Valdez-Scantling and Juju Smith. Like, you do not have a top 20 wide receiver, and you're still doing this good. Very impressive. Kind of shows how good Andy Reid is of a coach. To get the best of your players and guys who aren't great and were never really great with their teams, to be like with the Steelers and the Packers, doing so good so far. Craig Collins, has anyone heard anything about Logan Wilson? I don't know. Like, to me, I think it's kind of too early to tell if he would be out. I mean, this is Monday. It's one of those deals like when Higgins, when he got hurt against the Jets, I feel like it was kind of too early to speculate if he would be out or not. I feel like you'd kind of have a better indication if he'd be out by Thursday. If he's still not practicing by Thursday, I would say he'd probably be out. But as of right now, I think it's kind of too early to tell.
Yeah, Zach Taylor earlier today said day to day, which really isn't helpful trying to figure it out. But yeah, I agree. If he's not practicing by Thursday, him playing looks pretty bleak.
So, we're kind of talking about, the week 6 recap. We talked about the Steelers game, defeating the Buccaneers. The Giants have a major, win against the Baltimore Ravens, and the Bills defeated the Kansas City Chiefs. There are 3 teams right now who are currently 5-1. There's one team that is 6-0. So let's go to the 5-1. We'll just go ahead. I mean, we both know the answer to this. Contenders or pretenders, Bills. Obviously, they're contenders. But when you look at this Bills team, like, do you think how big of a gap do you think? Like, do you think the Bills are the best team in the league right now?
Yes, I think they are the best team in the NFL, but like you said earlier, it's not a huge gap between the Bills and Chiefs. We saw that yesterday that they're going to compete against each other. So I do think they're the best team in the NFL, but I think it's closer than people expect.
It's so weird because when you look at the Bills, I think they're the best team too. But they're aside from them, there's 2 other 5-1 teams. There's a 6-0 team. Those teams, to me, I still think the Chiefs, despite having 2 losses and don't have the good record of those other teams, the Chiefs are much better than those other teams, like the Giants, the Vikings, and the Eagles. I think the Chiefs, when it comes to the AFC right now, the second best team. I think the Chiefs in the whole NFL will probably be the second best team in the league. And it's so crazy that the fact that they don't have Tyreek Hill. I mean, it's wild, honestly. And they lost Tyrann Mathieu as well. Let's see here. Jack game. Our favorite game was by far the Eagles Cowboys. It was either Cowboys win and tie with the Eagles and Giants and wins, or lose and let Eagles advance. 2 good undefeated quarterbacks. Rush made a great comeback, especially in the second half. Yeah, Cooper Rush, to me, it's one of those things we kind of talked about earlier. Turnover-free football. Like, Cooper Rush wasn't great against the Cowboys. He was a game manager. But if you get a game manager who has turnover-free football without a good defense and good weapons, holy crap. Like, watch out, you're going to be dangerous. So look at the 49ers. Garoppolo by no means is a great quarterback. He's the best game manager in the NFL. He's one of the best game managers in a long time. He's not great, but he took the 49ers to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. He nearly took them to the Super Bowl this past season if, Matthew Stafford didn't get lucky and, the 49ers dropped the interception and we would have played the 49ers in the Super Bowl. But I mean, turnover-free football, it's just so important. And Cooper Rush, he really had no turnovers heading into this game. He had 3, against the Eagles. And that was really, the big factor, playing against the Eagles. The Eagles team heading into this game, defense was really good. And Rush just struggled. And it's not that Rush has, really sucked that game. It's just you knew the turnovers were going to come eventually. But I thought Cooper Rush has played great so far for the Cowboys, even with this, kind of bad performance. It's really goes back to show if you win a turnover battle, and if you can just play all right, the odds of you winning are so freaking high.
Yeah, absolutely. And when you start playing elite defenses, those game managers, performance will obviously be a little worse, especially if the defensive lines start playing really well, put pressure on the quarterback. But like you said, game managers, while they're not the best quarterbacks, they manage it right. They're going to win games. If they don't throw interceptions and the defense plays well enough, they have a legitimate shot to win. Obviously, the talent around them also plays a big part. As we saw like a few years ago with the Bengals 2019 season, Andy Dalton always kind of been a game manager. He didn't have the talent around them and obviously the offensive line, but because the offensive line was poor, not having great receivers, that really struggled for him. So for teams like the 49ers and when Cooper Rush is playing, however long that may be, because they have talent around them, and like you said, Garoppolo is arguably one of the best game managers in the NFL. And when They play well enough. They're not making dumb mistakes. They can very much win.
And talking about the Bills, obviously we both think they are contenders, obviously, but with the Cowboys and Eagles, yeah, I mean, if you have a quarterback who's a game manager turn over football, you got a great chance of winning, and that's what the Cowboys had up until last night against the Eagles. And the Eagles are the next team, pretenders or contenders. The Eagles are the only undefeated team in the NFL. I don't know. Like, I want to say they're contenders. Jalen Hurts to me has had a huge leap, of production and play from this year compared to the years past. But I still, when it comes down to the Eagles, when you're playing against teams like the Packers with Rodgers, the Packers are down. You're playing some against these other teams. I don't know if Hurts can play up to the level of some of these other quarterbacks. I'm going to say they're contenders right now just because how great their defense played, and they're the only undefeated team left. I mean, they win 3 more games, they're pretty much already in the playoffs. So it's kind of hard to say that they're not contenders, but I don't think they're as good as what their record indicates. I think they're a top 5 team, but even though they're undefeated, I don't think they're a top 2 team in the NFL, but I do think they're contenders.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think they're contenders. Another part of that is just how poor the NFC East has been playing, and that's easy improvements for the Eagles. It builds confidence. It gives them momentum for the rest of the season. So I also think that plays a really big part. And I'm really intrigued, like you, to see how Jalen Hurts plays against quarterbacks better than him, like you said. And that's when we'll really get the answer. Obviously, playing really great right now, but I really want to see how they play against better teams. So yeah, like you, I'm saying contenders right now, but I'm not overly confident saying that.
I'm kind of in the same boat. And another team here, we kind of talked to the Bills, who they're 5-1. Another team who is 5-1 is the Vikings. It's kind of weird. Like when you think about the best teams and like the teams with the best record right now, you're not really thinking the Vikings, but they're 5-1. Their last 4 wins have been by 1 possession, so they're just barely squeaking by. They have 5 wins. None of their wins are against teams who have over a 500 record. And also, with the Vikings, their only loss is to the Eagles, the only undefeated team in the NFL. This is so weird to me. This is another team I'm just kind of am, kind of not. I'm going to say they're pretenders because Kirk Cousins is kind of a game manager. Like when he's good, he can play. He's great. If he has 0 turnovers, the Vikings are really good. But when he has a turnover or 2, this Viking team absolutely sucks. I mean, look at this past week. I mean, Skylar Thompson, a 7th-round draft pick. I know he got hurt, but I mean, when he was in the game, the Vikings were barely able to get the lead against a 3rd-string quarterback. Against the Dolphins. They barely squeaked by against the Dolphins with Bridgewater playing hurt. I'm probably going to say the pretenders right now. But they're exceeding my expectations. But like I said, 4 straight wins by 1 possession. They're just barely squeaking by. They don't really have a marquee victory to me. I'm going to say, as of right now, the Vikings are pretenders.
Completely agree. I think they're pretenders, and they have some really talented guys on the offense. Obviously, Justin Jefferson and Dalvin Cook coming into mind, but I just don't think Kirk Cousins can keep it up. Like you said, they're squeezing by, and eventually, for a game manager, it's just that's not going to continue. So I think I think they'll make it to the playoffs, but I think they'll be an easy 1st-round exit. And when they go against better teams, he's going to struggle, and just squeaking by 1 possession. That just doesn't give me confidence. Obviously, it's the NFL. The Bengals squeaked by with a 1 possession game. So you can't always put that on the teams, but at the same time, when it's 4 games, I think that does cause a little concern.
And when you look at this Vikings team, after 6 weeks, they're already 2 games ahead of the Packers. The Packers have sucked so far, but they're still 3-3. With Rodgers, really doesn't have much help. Their defense doesn't have the star talent that has compared to years past. But I still think the odds of the Packers possibly winning the NFC North are pretty decent because, like you said, Kirk Cousins is going to start playing bad eventually. It's just, it's going to happen. He has at least 3 or 4 dud games a year. So I mean, we're talking about the Vikings, who are currently 5-1, pretenders or contenders. We both think they're pretenders, and they still might not even win their own division. The final team here, they are 5-1 as well. Crazy is New York Giants, and heading into last Sunday, when they played the Packers, a friend of mine is a big Packers fan. I was talking to him, like, if the Packers lose, I don't think it's a big deal. I think if the Giants win, it kind of proves to me, like, wow, the Giants might kind of be for real, because, they had so many players out. After that win, they were 4-1, and then maybe, people start kind of jumping on that, hype train for the Giants. They play an overrated Ravens team, but the Ravens aren't bad. They're a good team, but they are overrated. They defeat the Ravens. They play this Ravens team very, very good. Now, when you go to the Giants, they're 5-1. I want to say they're contenders, but all 5 of the wins are by 1 possession. But like we just said, like, they're barely squeaking by. Their wins are against the Titans. The Titans started 0-2 and looked like crap the first 2 weeks, but now they're picking it up. They beat the Panthers. Anybody can beat the Panthers right now. They beat the Bears. The Bears have a couple wins. I don't know how. They have one of the worst rosters in the NFL. And then they beat the Packers and the Ravens, 2, good teams. I'm going to say pretenders for now, but it just is crazy to me how much coaching can do with a team. When you look at this Giants team has a nearly identical roster compared to last season. And look what Brian Daboll has done, to this Giants team and Daniel Jones. Daniel Jones has played some really good football despite still having a freaking horrible offensive line. Brian Daboll was a huge reason for Josh Allen's development with the Bills. He got the best of Josh Allen, and now he's getting the best into Daniel Jones. I think Brian Daboll, as of right now, is definitely somebody who should be in for contention for Coach of the Year. But right now, I'm going to say pretenders for the Giants. I think it's close, but just the fact all of those games are 1 possession, if there's just one bad play by Daniel Jones, I mean, again, this team could be maybe like 2-3 or 3-2 right now. They're good, but I don't think they're that good. I'm going to say the pretenders.
Yeah, completely agree. I also want to say contenders, but I'm just not sold yet. Kind of with that poor offensive line, and while Daniel Jones is already having his best year so far, he didn't suddenly turn into an elite quarterback, even though he's playing better, mostly because of Brian Daboll and how he's developed. There's just they keep having 1 possession games. He's going to get outdueled by better quarterbacks. So I think we're going to see that later in the season, where while they win early, eventually defenses are going to figure it out. They're going to contain Daniel Jones. Then Daniel Jones, while I have been impressed with him, just won't be able to step up. And I hope I'm wrong, because I really like Daboll. And to be frank, I am kind of rooting for Daniel Jones just because of all the criticism he's received with the very poor coaching. But I think eventually the talent's going to get caught up to the Giants, and they're going to start losing more.
And it's interesting because before they won yesterday, the last time the Giants started 4-1, they finished the season 8-8 and missed the playoffs. So, I mean, they could possibly, still miss the playoffs, I guess. But when you look at this NFC right now, I feel like if you get 9 wins in the NFC, that's pretty much a virtual lock that you're in the playoffs. This NFC is not like the AFC. But with the Giants, it is interesting. Like, they're playing really, really good. I am very interested to see if they can keep it up or not. But, looking at the Giants, we both said they are pretenders. The Eagles, contenders. The Vikings, pretenders. And obviously the Bills, they are obviously going to be contenders. We both agree they're the best team in the NFL right now. So it's very interesting. We kind of talked about the Packers, when the Packers lost to the Giants. The Packers lost to the Jets yesterday, 27-10, and everybody's talking about Sauce Gardner. Sauce Gardner played really, really good against the Packers. He's proving to be already, it seems like he's going to be one of the best corners very early in the NFL. He's having a great year so far. Lots of people think he could win Defensive Rookie of the Year. I think that certainly is a debatable topic, but when you look at rookies right now, this was somebody I wanted the Bengals to get so bad. I had Blake Jude on my show a couple of times. He liked him a lot. We both talked about it. Tariq Woolen, the corner from Seattle Seahawks right now, is absolutely tearing it up, and just people aren't talking about it. And I think it's absolutely ridiculous. He's not getting the respect like Sauce Gardner is. Tariq Woolen has had an interception in 4 straight games. He has more interceptions than 12 NFL teams right now. He has 4 interceptions, 2 fumble recoveries, and a blocked field goal. And we're talking about a guy who has only played 6 games in his whole NFL career. Tariq Woolen was a converted, wide receiver, the corner at, UTSA. He was really, fell off the draft board. He was drafted in the 5th round. People thought he was going to go in the 3rd round. Tariq Woolen, everybody talks about Sauce Gardner. I think Tariq Woolen, as of right now, to me, I think I might have Woolen as Defensive Rookie of the Year over Sauce Gardner. He's just been playing out of his mind right now. And I feel like a lot of it has to do with he's just not in this big market like Sauce Gardner is with New York. Woolen is playing spectacular football and has been a major reason for Seattle's, kind of success on defense so far this season.
Yeah, I didn't even realize he had 4 interceptions in 4 games, but I know he's been playing extremely well. I think part of the reason why he's not getting the respect he deserves, I think Geno Smith has taken the league by surprise this year. So when teams are talking about the Seahawks, they're talking about Geno Smith, which isn't fair to Williams because he absolutely does deserve more recognition. And I think if he keeps playing consistent, as I expect him to, I think he gets more interception. Eventually, the media is going to look at him and take him serious and praise him more. So, yeah, long if he just doesn't fall off, which there's no indication that he will, he'll eventually get the attention he deserves.
Yeah, there's just been so many players like just kind of slept on under the radar. Woolen, there's several other players as well. But, we're talking about the NFL, something kind of earlier when I did on my show. I haven't done it recently much, unless it's been like a themed video, kind of like a Florida video or something like that. I haven't talked about college football much and compared to, years past. Major, loss this past week for Alabama. They lose to Tennessee 52-49. There's lots of discussion who should be number 1 in the college football standings right now. Some people say Tennessee because they just beat Alabama. Some people say Georgia because, Georgia's the reigning defending champs and they're currently number 1. And then some people say Ohio State. As of right now, the top 3 is Georgia number 1, Ohio State number 2, and Tennessee number 3. This is very interesting. I don't like Ohio State. I know you like Ohio State. As much as it pains me to say this, I think Ohio State should be number 1. They are the best team in college football right now. I don't think it's close. I know Tennessee just beat Alabama. I'm not downcrediting their significant win, their huge win, their biggest win in over 20 years. But we have to look at this Alabama team for a second. This Alabama team is the worst team in years for Alabama. If, Texas quarterback doesn't get hurt, Alabama might lose that game. Alabama, the questionable pass interference call against A&M. A&M's very inconsistent and overrated. They might lose that game. And they just lost against Tennessee. We're talking about 1 or 2 plays, swinging the other way. Alabama could be 3-3 right now. That is absolutely crazy to say. This Alabama team is just not it. If this was the Alabama team 4 or 5 years ago, I would put Tennessee number 1. But this Alabama team is overrated. They're not good. I don't think they're as good as people think they are. But this Tennessee team, a huge win. But I feel like Ohio State, if they play Alabama, they're beating them by at least 14 points. If Ohio State play Tennessee right now, they're beating them by at least 14 points. Georgia, to me, I get Georgia being number 1 more than Tennessee being number 1 because they're the reigning defending champs. They haven't lost. They did nearly lose to Missouri a couple weeks ago. They kind of had a not great performance against Kent State about a month or so ago. I believe only beating them by like 17 points. But when you look at Georgia, their defense is really, really good. Ohio State's defense is really, really good too. I think C.J. Stroud's probably the best quarterback in the country right now. I know Ohio State did not beat Notre Dame by a ton of points, but I don't feel like it's Ohio State, they played that bad. I feel just Notre Dame played really good that game. It was a defensive, bout between 2 teams who just had really good defenses. But I think Ohio State they're putting up so many points. They scored like 77 points against somebody earlier this season. Their defense has been sensational. I really think Ohio State's the best team in college football right now. I think head-to-head, they'll beat Tennessee. Head-to-head, they'll beat Georgia. I think heading into the season, I thought Ohio State was the best team in the country. And there's not really that, big of a, something that happened to say that they're not. I think Ohio State right now should be the number 1 ranked team in college football.
Yeah, I'm completely agree, and I'm glad you said that. And obviously, like you said, I'm an Ohio State fan. I try to be unbiased as possible, but like you said, that Georgia's game against Missouri, that gave me a little doubt. And yeah, some of the best college teams have struggling games, but that was just really an uninspiring game. And yeah, like you said, with the Buckeyes game against Notre Dame, the defense really stepped up. I know last year Ohio State's defense was a little inconsistent, but this year they're showing so much consistency. And when you look at that offense, CJ Stroud, who I also agree as of right now, he's the top quarterback in the country. But man, oh man, that wide receiver room. The Buckeyes, I feel like, always produce really good wide receivers. You got Smith and Jigba, who's currently injured. He's eventually going to return. Marvin Harrison, who's a complete beast, and just more guys like that. They have a few more 5 stars just sitting on the bench. That's how loaded their wide receiver room is. And that also helps CJ Stroud. And they also have a really good offensive line. One of the argued best offensive linemen in the draft, Paris Johnson Jr., somebody who I hope the Bengals look at. But yeah, it's just when you look at the total roster, and I'm not even mentioning Williams and Henderson, 2 really good running backs. That offense is just so complete. And while they didn't totally dominate Notre Dame's defense, you saw them when it mattered, they stepped up. So yeah, I agree. Ohio State should be number one. I think they can beat Georgia or Tennessee, obviously Alabama. And I just struggle to see really any college team to beat them right now.
Like that's what I was thinking. Like when you think of like the best team in college football, like who's the biggest threat to Ohio State? I really don't think it's anybody. Like I guess it would be Georgia because their defense is pretty good, and I mean a great defense against a great offense, that would be a good game. And Georgia's offense has been putting up points, but it's obviously not Alabama. It's not Tennessee. But I still think even with playing Georgia, who's the defending champs, Ohio State would kind of beat them handily right now. I would say by at least 10 to 14 points. Just this team to me is just so freaking good. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr., we're getting pretty old when players we saw when we were younger, their kids are now playing college football in the pros. But, I mean, Ohio State is the best team right now. I don't like to be biased. A team I don't like is good. I'll admit it. And I mean, they are just so talented right now. And when they play Michigan, Michigan's also another undefeated team. It's one of those situations when you look at the college football playoff standings this year, this could be very interesting because, Tennessee is undefeated. Ole Miss is undefeated. Alabama has 1 loss. Georgia's undefeated. When you start looking about it, there's going to possibly be 2 SEC teams in the playoffs. Michigan and Ohio State are both undefeated. Whoever loses, it seems like would be out, which to me, depending on the circumstances, I think is ridiculous. Because let's say if Michigan would beat Ohio State by 3 points, you cannot leave a team like Ohio State out of the playoffs with 1 loss, even though they might not play multiple marquee, conference games like Alabama when they're playing, LSU, Georgia, Florida, these types of teams. But this has potential to be one of the most, I would say, possibly controversial playoff, seasons ever because there's just so many situations. And if they all line up perfectly, there's going to be so many debates on, this team should be in, this team should be in. And it could be a huge, huge, problem, kind of for the playoffs.
Yeah, we saw this with the first year of the college football playoffs. There was a controversy between Ohio State, TCU, and Baylor. Then a lot of people said Ohio State shouldn't have been in. Then they obviously won the championship, so ended up being the right decision. But there's completely agree. There's going to be controversy, and if Ohio State and Michigan keep up dominating, and even if one team loses to the other, I think there's a legitimately argument that both teams should still be in the playoffs.
And when you look at it right now, like TCU's in the field, that's another team, but I feel like they're a type of team, like when you look at this Big 12, when you look at Oklahoma, TCU, Texas, Iowa State, even though Texas has been down, Iowa State's a team that seems like they can, beat the best team 1 second, then lose to a crappy team 1 second. All these Big 12 teams just have a dud performance once a year. They lose to a crappy team they shouldn't, and it kind of knocks them out of the playoffs. Or if they are in the playoffs, they get killed. I mean, look at when Oklahoma played LSU with Burrow. They got humiliated. But when you look at it, I mean, if TCU goes undefeated, and then you have Ohio State, Michigan, they're both undefeated up to that point, and then you have an Alabama who has one loss. Georgia's, I mean, let's say they're undefeated. It has potential to be absolutely crazy. And I feel like, with the college football playoffs, expanding the 12 teams, that makes it more interesting. I just kind of feel like, to me, I thought 8 would have made more sense. I just feel like when you go to 4 to 12, that's a significant gap. Like, that is huge, because when you look at it this way, there's been at least one blowout in every single college football playoff game. And I just don't – if you're having teams 1 through 4, imagine what teams 1 through 12 are going to be like. I feel like 8 just would have made more sense. With 12, there's going to be a group of 5 team in it. And I like, group of 5 teams to get chances, but I don't know. When you look at it, it just – there's going to be so many more blowouts. Yes, there's going to be more games, which is good. It's going to be more revenue for college football. That's pretty much the only thing they care about is making more money. But there's going to be – even though there's going to be more games, there's going to be more blowouts and less competitive games. And we're already seeing that with, just 4 teams in the playoffs. I kind of feel like 8 would have made more sense.
Oh, completely agree. And kind of another factor you have to consider is that's more games for the players. And that's kind of a general saying, but that gives more likelihood of injury. And these are still young kids. They're the same age of us, and that feels completely insane. And heck, we're probably older than a decent amount of the college football players. But even though they are extremely athletic and all that, just them playing have to 2 or 3 extra games versus other teams playing 1 bowl game. I think they're putting a lot of pressure on them. And yeah, I just think it would have made way more sense to do 8 teams. And if that's successful, then maybe you have a conversation about 12. But they should have seen 8 teams for the first few years, then have that conversation.
And it's one of those things where, like, the NIL and stuff like that, players are going to want more money and more endorsement deals and stuff like that. And even with, before the playoffs, you would see these teams, like, let's say, Stanford, they go to they don't make the playoffs, but they go to the Rose Bowl. You still see these players setting out of these huge, significant games that people dream about playing in. Even when you look at the playoffs, let's say, I don't know, you see a team, the group of 5 team representing, even though they're, they represent the group of 5, they might not be great. A team like Cincinnati, who is playing in Alabama or something like that, a guy doesn't want to risk getting injured, and you're sitting at the playoff game. And I know I'm talking about hypothetical stuff, but this will happen. I mean, with 12 teams, there's going to be players who, will do this for, kind of, helping their safety and the health by, not risking their draft stock. We saw this, times in college football recently. But I mean, when you look at Jalen Smith, a guy, with Notre Dame was supposed to be a top 10, top 15 pick, gets hurt, was out his whole rookie year. It was just, I mean, he was good, but just never really the same like he was in college. Should be interesting in college football, especially with this season with the playoffs, but especially when it gets to 12 teams. There's going to be so much, debates, who should be in, who should be out, stuff like that. Talking about college football, something else I haven't really talked about much recently is wrestling. Kind of big news. It happened kind of a week and a half ago. I haven't done a video since then. But Bray Wyatt returns to WWE. I don't really follow WWE like I used to. I'll still, watch it some. I'll still keep up with it a little bit. But what are your thoughts on WWE, having Bray Wyatt return?
I'm extremely excited because obviously his gimmicks don't always work out. The Fiend one was super exciting, but there were also a lot of downside for the wrestlers he beat. Like, that led to Seth Rollins turning heel. They kind of screwed him over by having Goldberg beat him for the championship. And the only person who really came out not that much defeated against him was Daniel Bryan at the Royal Rumble. Yeah, he lost, but him having that underdog personality that really didn't hurt him. But for current day, if you watch the return, you would see that the Firefly Funhouse has come to life. And we've only had one gimmick with, shouldn't say gimmick, one microphone appearance, one promotion with Bray Wyatt. But with the support he has, and him having like the Wyatt Six, I think it's going to bring in a really intriguing story. Like the Fiend is back, but Bray Wyatt will not be the Fiend. So I think I'm excited to see how they change it up. And Wyatt, when it comes to creativity, he's a genius. Triple H, he said that himself before Wyatt made his return. And so I think they're going to work something out. I think it's going to be really fun. I think they'll focus on the Firefly Funhouse coming to life for the first few weeks, not push him into a rivalry or start a big one right off the bat. I think they're going to develop him a little more. We'll get a bit of a sense if he's a face or heel, even though historically he's been a heel more times than not. I think with all the attention and hype the crowd has been giving him, I think they can definitely work him in as a face.
It's so interesting because he just kind of got fired, out of the blue, so sudden, last year, just kind of shocking. And now he returns. I feel like a lot of it has to do with Triple H. If Vince McMahon was still in power, I don't think we're seeing Wyatt return to WWE. And you hear the Wyatt Six, and I saw people say, Wyatt Six can mean 6 different gimmicks because way back with Husky Harris, the Wyatt family, now the Fiend. It's interesting, but with the Wyatt Six, like. I've read different reports. WWE is trying to get Bo Dallas to come back. He's brothers with Bray Wyatt, which to me, I just think it's so weird. And Liv Morgan is dating Bo Dallas, and there's possible a tease that Liv Morgan could maybe turn heel. So when you look at Liv Morgan and Bo Dallas, maybe they kind of join like a faction with Wyatt. I think that would be interesting. But it's so I don't know who benefits in this more. Bray Wyatt, to me, did the 100% right thing by not signing with AEW. If he would have signed with AEW, his career would have been ruined. The beginning of AEW, I liked it. It was really good. The first year, it was all right. But ever since they signed CM Punk, last season, last year, it has absolutely sucked. And they've not really, made the most of the so many WWE signings they're constantly having. They're not really getting the most of these, people. Look at Ember Moon, a girl, they signed, I feel like the past year or so, she hasn't done nothing. And Wyatt doesn't really fit the mold with AEW. And I think it was really smart for him not to just kind of pull the trigger and say, oh, well, they might have offered me more money and I maybe want more creative freedom. He really did the right move by not signing with AEW. WWE did the absolutely right move by signing him, when Triple H took over power to replace Vince McMahon. But it's so interesting. I really don't know whose benefits more because Bray Wyatt is definitely going to be a bigger name in WWE than any other wrestling promotion in the world. And he has potential to finally kind of have the creative freedom that he's wanted for so long that he didn't have with Vince McMahon. But on the other side with WWE, you look at this, if they do this properly, this could work out so great. When you look at Bray Wyatt, when you look at WWE right now, they don't really have the up and coming people like they did, let's say, 8 years ago with the Shield. With, when I first started watching wrestling, it was when the Shield broke up. When you had Reigns, Ambrose, and Rollins, all these guys kind of going their own way so they can individually become, these top guys. Rollins was the architect, with authority and Triple H, for so long. Reigns is, still this top guy, but now they don't really have it. When you look at the WWE, when you have a guy like Matt Riddle, oh, he's the future. And he's older than Seth Rollins. That's just kind of crazy to me. And you look at some of these other guys. Yes, they have potential, but with Bray Wyatt, you want to have these guys, these household names. When you look at household names in the WWE who are, constantly working. I'm not even going to put Roman Reigns in that category anymore because he's not a full-time worker compared to some other guys. The Miz is a big-time name. I think he's more mainstream than people think. Randy Orton, when he's not injured, he's obviously a big-time name. Reigns is up there. I would kind of put Rollins up there. McIntyre is big, but I don't think he's a household name. If you get Bray Wyatt to be that name, you want these guys to become the next superstars. You want a next John Cena. You want a next, The Rock or whatever. Bray Wyatt, if you do it properly, could be your next Undertaker. This was talked about years ago, and if they did it properly, when you look at the Undertaker, he's a household name. People who barely know anything about wrestling, oh, I've heard of the Undertaker. He had a huge, WrestleMania streak and everything like that. But when you look at Wyatt and his character development, and with his heel work and his creativity, he can kind of be this, Undertaker for this next, kind of era of WWE. We're already kind of seeing a major difference of production and storylines and characters and different things like that already with the Triple H era beginning. But if we look at the Triple H era, this could be a prime opportunity for Bray Wyatt to really be that star like people thought he could be for so long. Not this guy that you said lost to Goldberg for the championship was just absolutely ridiculous. This could finally be Bray Wyatt's time to just kind of shine and be this big household name that people always thought he could be.
Yeah, and kind of talking about Goldberg again, basically what happened, from my understanding, he basically went up to Vince McMahon saying, I'm not losing to this type of wrestler. And Vince was like, okay. And you see that Triple H is just more in touch with the fans. He's less arrogant, less ignorant, is open to more ideas. And over the years, we've seen Vince kind of slow down on that. He wasn't quite in touch. He hasn't caught up to the time. But Triple H is very much in touch. He knows what we want as fans. And so, yeah, I think that's a big reason why we're seeing the ratings go up tremendously for WWE.
And you look at, with, Wyatt and Goldberg, when you look at these, Saudi Arabia, pay-per-views, Crown Jewel, I think that's what the pay-per-view was. When you look at it, it's, all of this part-timers wrestling. It's kind of dumb, but it's genius. When you look at Saudi Arabia and how big of, they're getting so much money, you want a big household name there so you can get even more money, revenue, pay-per-view sales and stuff like that. When you get a Goldberg, when you get a Lesnar or something like that, you're going to get more money. When you look at Roman Reigns and Logan Paul, Logan Paul, to me, holy freaking crap. When you look at celebrity wrestlers who make a one match thing, Logan Paul is one of the best celebrity wrestlers I've ever seen. He is so athletic. He's been very, very good. And, he's wrestling Roman Reigns at Crown Jewel. And lots of people are upset. Why is he getting a title shot? I can kind of get that. But it's a money standpoint. And you cannot name any other WWE wrestler who's going to get the draw. People I know who don't watch wrestling. Oh, Logan Paul is fighting this one guy. Yeah. You're not going to be saying that, Rollins is fighting Reigns. These people who don't really follow wrestling, even though Rollins is a top star, you got to get these top stars to get people to watch your product. That's why I kind of think this Logan Paul signing was so freaking genius by WWE, because yes, he's an entertainer. He's a guy who hasn't really, had a huge, wrestling, background compared to these other people, but it gets eyes in the product and it makes money. And if you can do both of those, and it could be a good storyline, which so far I think Paul's done a pretty good job. I prefer him heel. I don't think face makes any sense at all, but I think it makes a lot of sense, with Paul and Reigns. But yeah, I like that a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. And my only kind of problem with it is nobody thinks that Logan Paul is actually going to win, but there's Roman Reigns, and I'll say over half his feuds, it was obvious he was going to win from the start, and I completely agree. You want those big names in Saudi Arabia. And that's part of the reason why Goldberg beat Wyatt. That's because he's such a big name. And yeah, Roman Reigns, Logan Paul, everybody, more Logan Paul, honestly. People know who that is, so they tune in. And I completely agree about his wrestling performance. He is doing so well. You can tell he's putting in a ton of hard work. And while he's more part-time than Roman Reigns, we've seen from WrestleMania and his other match against The Miz a few months after Mania, he can absolutely do a great match. So, and I think he's going to have even better matches. I think he improves each match. So, yeah, from a business standpoint, this match makes total sense, and it was a great idea by Triple H.
And, lots of people are upset, but like you're saying, a business standpoint, it's genius. And it would really kind of be dumb if they didn't do it. You're not going to be getting this money or revenue if you did a Reigns and Rollins, for the billionth time. I know we haven't seen it in a while, but 3-4 years ago, it seemed like we were doing that every other week. It seemed like, but with Reigns, obviously he has both the titles. When you look at Reigns, who do you think he should drop the titles to?
Honestly, Seth Rollins. I think because there's still an unfinished storyline there. Roman Reigns technically lost at day one, but he got himself disqualified, and the title doesn't change with a disqualification unless they put in some type of talking hard simulation. And when that happens, normally the person who you would think makes that mistake, they end up winning. So yeah, Rollins still has some unfinished business. Him being the United States state championship now, it will be a while until he probably gets another match. Somebody else who I could see, and right now, just started a feud with Brock Lesnar, but I could see Bobby Lashley also being a potential guy. We haven't seen Roman Reigns versus Bobby Lashley, and I think that would be a great storyline. The fans have really gotten behind Bobby Lashley lately, and he's extremely over. And I think fans would be ecstatic to see Bobby Lashley hold the championship again.
I just hope it's not Lesnar. I cannot imagine it would be, but oh my God, if we would have Lesnar getting another championship. This is the one thing I like about this, turning on Raw. It wasn't like a 15-minute promo. They cut right to it, the Lesnar and Lashley feud. And I like that Lesnar's in a feud that's not for the championship. It seems like that's the first time that's happened in I don't even know how long. I remember it seems like one of the last times he was in a feud that wasn't the championship, it was Ambrose. I might be wrong, but the Ambrose the Salad match or something like that. But when you look at it, yeah, Rollins to me makes a lot of sense. The only WWE pay-per-view I've watched the past year was Royal Rumble, but you could tell then that they teased that Reigns couldn't really finish Rollins, and that was a kind of a continuation. You knew that storyline, maybe not then, but it's going to continue at some point, and then Rollins might end up beating Reigns. And then somebody else is Cody Rhodes. I just cannot imagine Cody Rhodes coming to WWE without winning the championship at WrestleMania. I feel like that was pretty much his main reason. He wanted to accomplish something that his dad wasn't able to do, win the world title and stuff like that. But let's say, Cody Rhodes is out of action right now. If he wins the Royal Rumble and he main events WrestleMania and he defeats Reigns, it would make sense. But at the same time, it just kind of feels like obvious booking at that standpoint. I don't really want it to be obvious, but it does make a lot of sense. I would say Cody Rhodes and Rollins. Rollins to me, I think would be great because when you look at Rollins to me, when he had the World Championship and the U.S. Championship, back I think it was 2016, 15. When he fought Cena and Sting at a SummerSlam, that was peak Rollins. I want to see WWE have that type of Rollins again, where he's having these 4 or 5-star matches every other night. And I think he's capable of doing that. He now has the U.S. Championship, like you mentioned. Defeated Lashley last week, but it is one of those things, like you mentioned, with Rollins having the U.S. Championship right now. There's no way they're going to be having this storyline with Rollins and Reigns right now, because you're not going to have Rollins have the U.S. and World Championship when he's still not your top guy. As long as Reigns is, has both titles, or is still having these titles and still kind of wrestling and stuff, you're definitely not going to be having Rollins 2 championships. But it should be really, really interesting.
Yeah, and something kind of interesting is Cody Rhodes. This was under Vince McMahon, but his plan was Roman versus Cody Rhodes at SummerSlam, and Cody Rhodes would have lost that, according to multiple reports. And that would have sucked. But it's also your first championship match back. That doesn't mean you're not going to get it. And I agree. Now that Triple H is back in charge, I think he would have booked that differently. He knows the people who want Cody Rhodes. And even though he just returned a few months ago, people know who he is. They know how well he did in AEW. They're not looking at the other way. He is so over. Every time he had an entrance, the place would explode. So I completely agree with Cody Rhodes, and hopefully he can come back to the Royal Rumble possibly even win it, challenge Roman Reigns, and finally take the championships off him.
Yeah, lots of, with the Royal Rumble coming up, it's one of those deals like the Royal Rumble is only in about 3 months. It's kind of crazy to think it's, not that far away when you have guys like, Orton's going to probably be back by then. Rhodes should be back by then. There's talks about Omega and AEW, like the situation happening there is really, really bad, but Omega's contract ends, I think, in February, so he wouldn't be able to return, be in the Royal Rumble. But you want to think Omega would go to WWE? I would highly, highly doubt that. But at the same time, when AEW first started, I don't think anybody possibly could imagine Cody Rhodes was going to leave straight to WWE the first chance he could. So it's one of those deals. We hear it all the time. Never say never in never say never in wrestling, because you never know. But it should be really, really interesting with WWE and Royal Rumble, with who Reigns could drop the titles to, and especially with the Triple H era, it should be really, really good. We've already seen significant improvements just these past couple of months. But we've kind of talked about the Bengals, win yesterday against the Saints, pretenders and contenders, kind of recapping some of the games here in week 6 of the NFL. Who should be number 1 in the college football standings, kind of talk about wrestling a little bit as well. So, Braeden, can you kind of tell some of the listeners who can follow you on social media?
Yeah, absolutely. So you can follow my Instagram page, Bengals_NFL. You can follow my Twitter, which isn't nearly as big. It's Bengals_action. And when you look at my Twitter name, it's also Bengals NFL, except not the underscore. You can follow my YouTube page, also Braeden Guthrie. I do multiple different things there. I obviously talk about the Bengals, my Bengals NFL show. Every week I post top 5 Bengals plays from the past game. And I also have a Falcons franchise series going for Madden 23, a rebuild. I'm on season 2 of that, but if that's something that interests you guys, you can start from the beginning. It's on my Madden playlist.
Yeah, definitely check out, Braeden there on social media, on Instagram, the best non-biased Bengals page on Instagram. Really nice content. On YouTube, go check them out there. I'll put the links in the description below. If you're new to the channel or seen videos before, make sure to subscribe to my channel. I really appreciate it. Follow me, the Sports Dude Hine Show on Instagram, Dude Hine Show on Twitter. Like I said, make sure to like this video and subscribe. I really, really appreciate it. Thank you all so much for watching. We'll see you all next time on the Sports Dude Hine Show.